Hello.
Good
Hi.
morning. Good
So,
morning.
good news. We know it's going to be a fantastic recording because we actually were able to get everything aligned for our intro. So that's really good news.
Just wait, I must press my mouse by mistake. So, like last time.
Well, welcome back. It's season 2, and we are so excited to be back. This season, we're going to be talking about change and curiosity and about connection. And so today we're actually talking about how to be curious as a leader. Now, before we get into that, just want to remind you that if you are here for the first time, you can find more about us over at wholehumancoaching.com, learn about what we're doing and ways that you can that we can work with you as well, or just learn more from us in our resource section and get some great free resources. Now, Carol and Colin, curiosity.
Deep sigh.
That was a big sigh. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
big sigh. Okay. I want to get right into it. Curiosity means a lot of things, and I think as a leader, it can be easy or tempting to not even play with curiosity because curiosity is not something that is normally talked about in leadership, right?
No, it really isn't. Because when you think about it, to be curious are attributes that we put when we don't know.
Yeah.
So if we're curious about something, the automatic assumption is, well, we don't know about it. So leaders are not well positioned if at least it looks as though they're not well positioned if they don't have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
this conversation, I think, is going to flip that on its head, because curiosity is such a wonderful attribute to bring to leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Especially today, don't you think?
Me.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
just gonna
look at
move over
that. Here comes the sun.
there we go.
We should play that. Here comes the sun.
Yeah.
I think you're both right, especially in the era or the time that we're in these days, right? Where AI is changing things at warp speed, where post-pandemic, the whole workspace and place radically changed the way people want to work, the way they work them. The way people are working and the way they would like to work in the future. And I think it's time to kind of throw out the rule book, if you like, on what quote unquote leadership is and what is the multi-dimensions of it, because the world has dramatically changed and people have changed, and we're done with the old stuff. So you've got I think it's almost a prerequisite now, as opposed to something that people should be thinking, oh, let me think about that. It's kind of an essential ingredient.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting? Even in regular life, I know that now. So, for example, my husband and I were watching a TV show the other night, and there was an actor that came on, and I was like, "Who's that actor? Who's that actor?" Trying to remember, right? And rather than just playing it around, I just picked up my phone in the middle of the show and I Googled, right, to get their name. Now, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have done that, right? I would have just been like, I would have, maybe it would have bothered me for a while I was trying to remember who it was, but I would have been reaching back into my memory, and I would have stayed curious around it. But it's easy to short circuit those things now.
Oh, you bring up such a wonderful point, because I'm guilty of the same thing in the middle of a show. Like, I know that actor, but what do I know him from? And what my brother, who is very averse to Googling in general, he says we're retarding our brains. We're stopping that thought of ability to be able to be curious and think it through. Because you would have remembered. I'll bet you would have remembered. It might have been the middle of the night, but you would have remembered.
Yeah.
So
that's an interesting reminder, because I jump onto AI now and ask questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just and then I don't question it. I'm like, oh, there's the answer. That was quick. So I guess these podcasts are also a reflection of our styles that can open up.
Yes.
Good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Carol, you brought up something interesting when we were talking about before we started this this episode about some of the ways that curiosity is. So, as coaches and as people who teach the and work with and coach leaders to be more coach-like leaders, we're so curious that it can be easy for us to forget that curiosity may not necessarily be considered a strength in a lot of areas for leadership.
And I think you're absolutely right. Sorry, I'm moving again because I just feel like I have the sun directly in my life is so bright. I need sunglasses. I need shades.
Good morning.
What I do realize though is that as an individual leader, we may be hesitant to express our curiosity because we don't want to be seen as being weak. And yet what we as coaches know is that there's a tremendous strength in being able to ask a question. And that was what you said, Crystal, earlier, is that if we shift a statement to a question, something occurs in a conversation. Something else opens up that allows for thoughts that would not have been there if we hadn't asked the question. So what's a situation that you may have coached on, or that you can imagine that if you'd said a statement, it would have gone one way, and if you'd asked a question, it would have gone the other?
Well, I actually have a great example of this in conversation with someone just this week. Actually, we were talking about an event coming up, and they are a business owner, and they were and so on the one hand, they are trying to promote their business. And so but on the other hand, they're also focused on all the things that are not working right in their business right now, and the lack of actual revenue in the business. And at the event that's coming up, we were talking about what are some ways she could promote at this event that she's speaking at. And I said, well, why don't would you have a table with even just, I know this sounds so simple, but with your information at this, because there's a lot of people. And the first thing that came out of her mouth was like, but who would want to do that? Who would, I can't stand there at the table the whole time at the event because I'm speaking. And I'm like, okay, let's back up and let's think about instead, I wonder who would love to help me with that, and how I could make that table a successful point for people to learn about what I do. Change the conversation.
Yes.
So I think, and I think that a big part of being curious is like any other habit, we have to build the muscle of curiosity. It's one of the muscles that will quickly atrophy in life. We come out of the womb really strong with the curiosity muscle, right? Those first few years, we are strong with the curiosity muscle. But because of everything from the education system that we're in to the reality of things being at our fingertips, it's easy for that muscle to atrophy in our lives. And really easy as a leader for it to happen.
Yes.
I always say, turn off the news and get informed, and by that, I mean, dive deep into what is important to you, dive deeper into what is driving you, right? As opposed to just the sort of superficial, easy stuff, the junk food leadership tips and tricks, that you can learn in 5 minutes. It really feels like a time to dive deeper and question everything,
Well, that's a perfect segue, Colin, because I think question everything is one of the pieces that we're bringing to a whole human coaching, is that let's look at those sacred cows. Let's consider what we think has to be the way it is. And we have a perfect example right in our midst with you running for town council.
Right.
Because your
Right.
platform is not, let's do it the same, is it?
No, let's look at what we have done in the past, and let's look at different ways of doing it, because there is, at least here, there is this a perception of a lack of transparency and a lack of communications and a lack of dialogue. So
Mhm.
I've been asking myself, well, what could we do differently? How could we have conversations with the community, um, that are different from the way they've been had in the past? And instead of the old school town council table and the spectators over here, which sounds so sort of medieval, right? I'm kind of going, well, what if we had a circle? What if we had open conversations? This morning, I had our first coffee with candidates, and nobody's ever really done that before, where you just sit and you converse, and you might not agree, but you listen, and it it changes everything. I think this
Yes.
just going,
Mhm.
e- especially with the way I think modernity is speeding up so quickly, that
Mhm.
we've got to look at these institutions and these ways of being and these laws. I'm not saying break the law, but how can you play with it differently? It's not so rigid that you can't be more expansive. And I think we need to do that every day in leadership. But it brings up the other side of the equation, which we've talked about before. This idea of being able to fall down, you've got to you don't have to do anything, but the idea of playing with curiosity, but also allowing that if the ideas aren't right, that you're not punished for them. The idea of, I think we've
Mm.
used that metaphor of falling down on the bike, or I can't remember what it is, but
Yeah.
just the falling down, getting up, be curious, keep going, go into the darkness. We speak about that a lot in our coaching practice, right? We're
Mhm.
just here to shine some light on that space that might look
Mhm.
dark right now. But then when you
Right.
go there, all of a sudden you discover new possibilities, new ideas, new ways of being, which
Mhm.
I think are so critical today.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah. Now, that brings us to a really useful tool. And we have talked about this tool in the past, but it is so important. When something is valuable, it is worth repeating over and over again,
Hmm.
Mhm.
because people listening may not actually know about this tool. And
Mhm.
it is an appreciative inquiry tool that Carol, for many years, has taught us about it. And I've used it, and I use it with clients all the time. We use it in our coaching and in our training as well. Can you talk about the name it, flip it, frame it model, Carol?
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. So it's really 3 steps, and it's just that simple. It's name it, flip it, frame it.
Mhm.
So what we would do first is we name what's there. So if there is a situation, if there's a challenge, if there's something that is in front of us that doesn't feel like it's in flow, then we actually describe it. We name it clearly. It's the elephant in the room. It's the opportunity to say what you can see. Enough already is one of the ways that we've described it in other
Yeah.
conversations. We name it. And then the opportunity there is to flip it over. So if you had the positive opposite of it, what would that look like? And people go, "Oh, well, we'll never get there." And that isn't the point. The point is to be able to describe it entirely in a different way. So look at it, walk around it, and look at it from the other side. What would that look like? So it's the idea, Colin, that you have in the possibility of a town council. If we have this place where people feel separated and disconnected, if we
Mm.
flipped it so we were all in a circle, what's
Hmm.
possible?
Mhm.
Right.
And then you can
Exactly.
begin to frame it in something that is workable. So the
Right.
reframe on it is where you go to a more practical step. Maybe the first session isn't all done that way, or maybe there's 10 minutes of it that's done that way. But you be able to take a look at it from the different perspective that gives you
Mhm.
opportunities to see something in a way that you hadn't seen it before. And that requires you to be curious about it.
Mhm.
That's right. And if it's too much, right? If that naming might seem overwhelming to people because of the work that they're doing, we often use this technique called the inventory of stories, right? Where
Mhm.
you break it down. Whatever is in
Yes.
front of you that might feel challenging, break it down into smaller pieces, and then do exactly what Carol was saying.
Mhm.
The inventory of stories, and then you go and name each of those little pieces and reframe and go from there.
Could you give us oh, sorry, Carol, go
No,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Colin, could you give us an example of when you've used that with someone and how that process
Mhm.
works for people?
Sure. I typically use the inventory of stories when life has become, and it's in leadership positions as well, but when your life has become so overwhelming that
Mhm.
you shut down.
Mhm.
And a lot of people sometimes feel very maxed out, feel burnt out, feel like they can't see forward into
Mhm.
tomorrow even. So the idea of doing an inventory of stories is really sitting with them or walking with them and breaking each one down, and it's really it's really deconstructing all of the stories that they've got in their head one by one in
Mm.
a gentle fashion, because
Yeah.
it's sometimes they're so overwhelmed or they're so swirling down into negativity. But if you can if you can allow somebody to stop, deconstruct those stories, get them out in writing. So often we go into these places of burnout or anxiety or negativity, um, because we haven't quantified the stories that we've got in front of us. So that's why
Mm,
we
yeah.
speak of this inventory. Treat it
Mhm.
like a ledger. Be very scientific about it.
Mhm.
Often sometimes it's related to finances, or it's related to careers and objectives,
Yeah.
and and somebody's living in fear. A leader is living in fear or in denial or whatever it is, whatever is holding them down, but they haven't quantified what that flip side of the
Right.
story, the name it, frame it, flip it, like,
Mhm.
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
how much do you need, what is this, what are the steps, and how many years do you want it? Because some people just start to think so big and broad that it stops them. So
Mhm.
that's really
Yes.
what it is
Yeah.
break it
Yeah.
break it down, quantify it. Let's be scientific about this.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I know I don't like accounting either, but if we can quantify all of those little bits and pieces of stories, we can then begin to reframe them, right?
Yeah.
And then have
And
that
the
appreciative inquiry about them.
I love the inventory language of it, because part of what we're always paying attention to as coaches and as human beings together is the language. So, an
Hmm.
inventory of stories, when you take an
Hmm.
inventory, you might be ready to be rid of some, but you might want to keep some.
Mhm.
But you don't know until you've actually seen how much you've got.
Exactly.
So that is
Exactly.
it is a gentle process as you're describing
Hmm.
it, Colin. It isn't like
Yeah.
slamming the door on your stories. It's
No.
like, let's look at them. Let's
Hmm.
invite them in.
Mhm.
That's right.
Mm.
One by
Yeah.
one. And yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Crystal.
No, all I was thinking was, in part of when I hear that, part of it is the language that's used around those things that give you indications. So if you're wondering how to be curious about your own stories and the stories that you keep on telling yourself, consider the language that you use
Yes.
around those things. So for example, do you say like I need to or I should and there's like a heaviness around it?
Right.
Mhm.
Flipping, if you were to flip the language on that,
Mhm.
um, I get to, I want to, I will,
Hmm.
I'm
Yes.
Exactly.
going to. There's
Mhm.
a very different energy there,
Hmm.
that can start to actually change the story, right? Just by simply shifting and staying curious about the perspective that you're using on it.
Oh,
Right.
yes. And that is something that we can do immediately. So this isn't, as our conversation goes on, this is something for our listeners. You can do this right now.
Mhm.
Because once you bring awareness to your language, you begin to shift who you are. It is in that moment of awareness. Oh, I said I should be doing that right now. I wonder if I change that to, I want to be doing that right now.
Yeah.
What happens in that moment that begins to shift all of this? And it's those little tiny things. It's like the trim tab on a sailboat. Now, I'm not a sailor, so please forgive me, all the sailors out there that really know this well. But my understanding is that a trim tab on a sailboat, whether it's 10 feet long or whether it's 1,000 meters long, when a ship turns, it begins to turn at a trim tab. So you can trim tab your life to make a change today, in a moment, in 5 minutes. And those small changes, those incremental changes, is what shifts the direction of something like an ocean liner.
Course correction, moment by moment. It's brilliant.
Wow, that's really good. That's
I
a
think we
lot.
need to stop here because we we can't. Thanks,
That's just
Carol.
that's really profound, actually, right? Like those little, like, big doors turn on small hinges, and that
Yeah,
the idea of a trim tab,
that's right.
small things. And we discredit small things very easily because we think that if it's a big problem, it needs a big solution.
Yes.
But the energy may be going so quickly and have so much velocity and, who knows, years behind it as it's moving forward, that it's not like we're going to be able, like, because to stop it directly means it's like smashed into a wall and everything could blow up. But what would happen, we can slow down the energy and we can turn it and we can bring things back onto the course that we want them on. That's a different,
It is.
different
It
way to
really
look
is.
at it.
And you could see what we just went through with my face in the sunlight, how quickly the sun is moving.
Yeah.
Like things in our day move very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So I just want to leave us with the idea that we can take a step that is also quick, and that the day moves. And no matter what, the sun's going to come up and do that again tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we have the
Fingers
opportunity.
crossed. Yeah.
If you didn't do it today, you get to do it tomorrow.
Yeah. That's good.
Awesome.
Well, leaders, stay curious, my friends.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for
Don't
the
accept everything at
conversation.
face value.
Yeah.
Ask
Thank you for this
questions.
conversation. If you are
Thank you.
still here, thanks for joining us. We do this because we believe in not only the conversations that we're having, but we believe that you as a leader are worth the investment of time. And so that's why we're providing this, and that's why we put our energy into this, because we believe that leaders are wherever you're at, you are a leader. And so thank you for joining us. If you've enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And if you have topics that you would like us to cover, or guests that you would like us to have, because we have some really great guests coming up in the next few weeks. And if you have any suggestions for guests, we would love to hear from you as well. And if you want to know more about our work, you can find us over at wholehumancoaching.com. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.